Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge and welcome to Eldridge & Company. I love maps and buildings and secret passageways and out-of-way places, and I hope you do too, because my guest today knows more about these things than almost anyone else. John Tauranac is an urban and architectural historian as well as a map maker and writer. I knew I was going to stumble. I'm sorry. Are there really secret passageways?
Oh, absolutely. The first published maps that I ever did were the Undercover Maps the New York Magazine published. And I had gone around knowing how to get from here to there undercover for years. And then I realized that nobody else knew those things. So during a period of euphemistically being between the jobs, I set out to chart them officially. And I made a rough of Midtown, basically from 32nd to 60th Street, from 3rd to 8th Avenue. And I showed it to New York Magazine, and they said, "This is very interesting." And they handed my work over to an art director, who metamorphosed it into a finished product. And those.
So I remember years ago, when I was really young and I worked at CBS, and if I wanted to get to Grand Central, I could go into the Roosevelt Hotel, I think, right?
That's right, you still can.
Yeah, so tell us some of these great, I loved it, it's so wonderful.
Grand Central is one of the best examples of a commercial undertaking that determined early on that the buildings linked to it would be linked by passageways. It's one of the exemplars of city planning in that respect. Rockefeller Center is another one. Right. My task, as I saw it, was, sure, talk about those things, but also go out and expose the others. And my favorite was, it's now inaccessible, but if you walked from the 42nd Street subway station at 6th Avenue, without paying the token in those days to get into the subway, but in the free zone, you could walk from 40th Street down to 35th Street, through, to go up to Macy's, go through Macy's, come down at 34th Street, continue south to 33rd Street, take what was then called the Gimbel's Passageway, over to Penn Station, and you could exit it at 31st and 8th.
All of those buildings, they're all connected?
All connected.
So who connected them?
Well, two of them were as a result of the construction of the 6th Avenue subway. But most buildings have back doors, after all,
right.
And they were considered accessible to the public. My challenge was that all this had to be free. You couldn't drop a token in the subway and travel that way. And another challenge was that every door I came to, I had to open and walk the length of the passageway. And if it ended nowhere, I had to go back to square one and go find the next door.
So how long did this
Too bloody long.
Wait, you grew up in the city? I'm
a native, yeah.
And were you exploring when you were young?
Well, my father was in the hotel business. He managed hotels, and we couldn't walk down the street without his telling me something about a building that we were passing, or where there had been a bit of bloodshed or romance.
My father managed the Ansonia Hotel.
You're kidding.
In 1930, he was a young man during the Depression, and also the Sutton Hotel, which was on the east side. So I always heard stories about that as I grew up, but not many more. So you then noticed buildings.
Well, I did. I learned by osmosis more than anything. My father was not an architectural historian or an architectural critic, but he knew buildings, and he knew what had gone on inside them. And then what did you train? You went to school. I was an English Lit major, which qualifies you for everything and nothing. Yeah. And when I got out, I went to work as a copywriter at J. Walter Thompson, which taught me how to write with brevity. Right. If it wasn't pithy, it wasn't any good. Right. And that's great training if you want to be a writer. Get in and get out. Say what you have to say, you know. Fast. Yeah. Right, that intention thing. So then when did you start with all of this? Well, I mean, when I was about 15, I suppose, I started being interested in the city. There was a wonderful book published by John A. Cowenhoven, who taught English at Barnard, and it was for the 200th anniversary. I knew him. Did you? Yeah. He was a wonderful
Right.
man.
Yes.
And he did a book for Columbia to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the founding of the university. And it was a book that I saw and I wanted, and I asked my father. It was on sale. I asked my father if he would buy it for me, and he did. And I would just sit there gazing at the pictures and reading the captions, and that was really the beginning. I also found that my mother had died when I was young, and my father was regularly asked how he could be raising 2 children in the city without benefit of a mother, and he said that he couldn't imagine any better place to raise 2 children than in the city.
I agree with him totally.
And so I heard him defending the city as a matter of course, and so I started defending the city too. And I just grew to love it more and more.
I used to go exploring. When I knew you were going to be the guest on the program, I was thinking back. We used to go, when I was in 6th grade, we used to go down to Penn Station, and we'd always go walk around, or we'd go to Grand Central Station and explore. And I was just commenting that the change in that people don't let their kids go out by themselves anymore. What a sadness that is.
That's right. I remember as a kid going to Grand Central. My father was at the Dryden Hotel on 39th Street at the time. And I remember going to Grand Central on my own to go to the newsreel there.
Yeah, right.
And
it's different.
It was, it was just that kind of, for a 10-year-old kid to be able to walk the streets and go out on his own. I mean, well, I don't want to start talking about.
So when did the first map come?
The first map was 1972. That was the first of the Undercover Maps, and then I did a sequel of Lower Manhattan. The World Trade Towers hadn't even gone up yet. And that was 73. Then in 76, I did a book for the MTA called Seeing New York, the official MTA travel guide. And that had a new subway map in it because we didn't want to use the schematic map that was out then. And so we took a City Planning Commission map, and we had to do it in a hurry. This was the exigencies of time against us. And we took a City Planning Commission map, and we basically surprinted the routes of the subway purely geographically with the color-coded discs running alongside it. And that was the first stab at doing an official map that I took. Then there was a movement to throw out the schematic map and have a more geographically accurate map. And I wound up chairing the Subway Map Committee and being the chief designer of the map. And it was a process that was so problematical. It was fraught with danger because every time I would think that we had solved a problem, somebody, there was a committee, and people were on it who were much more knowledgeable about the arcane workings of the subway than I assure you. I would invariably hear, well, what about DeKalb Avenue?
Did you have to, do you need to go to the places when you put them on a map?
Well, no, you don't, but I think you have a moral obligation to do so.
Yeah. So you've traveled every line.
Yes, I've gotten, there are times when I try to conjure up in my mind's eye what the street looks like above the subway station. And since I haven't done it in a long time, I'm losing that ability. Only the other day I went to Prospect Park South, and the guy I was going to see said, well, you just get off at 7th Avenue and you walk, and I couldn't conjure it up in my mind's eye.
I always want to get on the right car at the right door, so I'm right at the steps or the escalator, and then to get out on the right corner.
Precisely.
Right? That's supposed to be the game, isn't it? That's the goal.
That is the game. That is exactly the game.
Does everybody feel that way? I don't think so. No.
And when I was at the MTA, I argued that signage leading to stairways should tell you what corner you were going to.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Which I think is critical.
Yeah.
And I was told by many people, nobody has a clue what corner they're looking for. Well, it turns out they do.
Yeah, definitely. I get very upset when I've got it all wrong sometimes, and I did get it wrong recently. But when I used to go to City Hall, I always knew, and then I'm out of practice, so I've been off a little bit. But it's the third car, the first door, and it's right at the escalator that goes up at Park Place. Anyway, when you do a map like this, let's look at Manhattan block by block. Do you do only Manhattan?
No, I mean, when I did
Right.
subway system maps, for instance. I do the other boroughs, of course. But on a book such as Block by Block, which literally is block by block, and I walked every single block in the city, which for me was not a negative thing. It was paradise for me. I mean, what more could I ask for than to be able to look at every building in the city?
What kind of shoes do you wear? Comfortable?
Well, I wore out 2 pairs of walking shoes doing this. That book took me 3 years to do because I honestly walked with a clipboard and jotted things down.
And it's annotated. I mean, you would decide what site to locate on the block.
Yes, well, but there were certain givens. I tried to include every house of worship. Every museum had to be on it. Every school, from grammar school up. Every theater, off-Broadway, Broadway, movies. I mean, I'd like to think that everything that you're looking for is in Block by Block.
That's great.
I'm asked regularly if I'll do one for Brooklyn, and I always cite Thomas Wolfe, who wrote a short story called Only the Dead Know Brooklyn. Oh. And the punchline is, because it takes a lifetime to learn it.
That's true.
Well, it's taken me a lifetime to learn Manhattan.
Right. It's really something.
Yeah, Brooklyn is too bad.
This one is subway and bus lines.
That's right.
This tells you how to make connections and where to go and everything?
Well, I like to think everything. And at each subway station are the sites that you would see when you get off there, all the museums, etc.
Yeah, I love this little one, which just folds up for your wallet.
Yeah, it fits in.
It's an accordion folder.
That's
so, the maps, was that the beginning? I mean, J. Walter Thompson then to, what happened? I still don't know how you did a map.
Well, because I thought that to verbally describe, to write how to navigate these passageways would be an instant cure for insomnia.
So that was the first one.
Yeah. I thought, you can only do it by mapping it. You don't want to say turn right at the second door on your left, and that's...
So doing all this makes you also a historian, because you then, you can trace it, can't you?
Well,
the subway
yeah, but
line really describes what happened in that. How it got there?
Well, I minored in history as an undergraduate, and I went to NYU and I got my graduate degree. I got a master's in American history. So I tried to merge all these things that interest me. And, I'm one of those lucky people who was able to turn an avocation into a vocation.
A lot of people got rich with the subways by developing.
Yes.
Real estate.
Well, you remember George Washington Plunkett, who said, "I seen my opportunities and I took them." There was a developer named Lee who befriended August Belmont II, who was the president of the first Interborough Rapid Transit, the first successful subway. And he made a lot of money on Upper Broadway, buying land before anybody had an inkling that the subway was coming, and then developing it. And it's a name that everybody knows. Jacqueline Lee Bouvier was her grandfather.
That's her grandfather. Yeah. Somebody was just telling me where they live, but I don't remember. But it also... it had real political implications, because if there was an express stop, would that enhance the value of the property?
Well, it's axiomatic. The population follows transportation.
Yeah.
And so if the transportation is better, yes, that immediate neighborhood will be that much more valuable. We forget what the city was like before the coming of the subway. In the 1890s, the center for entertainment was Herald Square. By 1904, the subway had arrived at a new place called Times Square. It had been Longacre Square, and that was a local stop in those days, which is interesting. But the theater world shifted, moved half a mile north, basically. And by 1910, 1915, it was give my regards to Broadway, remember me to Herald Square, tell all the boys on 42nd Street that I will soon be there.
Oh, that's what that song is.
Yeah, because the theater world had moved. And, you don't talk about Herald Square theaters these days. You talk about Broadway theaters.
Right. That's so interesting. So what other neighborhoods? You've also produced this book, which is an elegant book, and it's called Elegant New York, and it's about the buildings from 1885 to 1915. What's your favorite building? Is there one?
Well,
Is it this?
I have to be faithful to the Empire State Building.
You better be. You got 2 books.
That's right. So number 2 is the Chrysler Building.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talked about the Ansonia, which your father managed. I would put the Ansonia in one of the top 10 buildings in the city. I would also put City Hall, Grace Church.
City Hall is such a beautiful building.
Oh, it's marvelous.
And it used to be so wonderful because it was the meeting place of downtown and everybody'd stroll in and out. And it's such an interesting government building because you don't feel intimidated by it.
That's right.
But now it's got, all the security things and this and no people, and it's very sad. But it is a beautiful, beautiful building.
Well, one of my favorite stories about City Hall is that by the 1890s, with talk of the consolidation of the city, there was a movement to tear down City Hall because it was too small, and everybody said it was redundant. And there was a beginning of a preservation movement, and people said you shouldn't tear it down because it's historical. It's the center of municipal government, and we all have affection for it. They didn't talk about the aesthetics of it really. Some people said we should disassemble it and give it to a worthy institution, and it was offered to the New York Historical Society because they were looking for a new home, and the New York Historical Society very wisely said no, it belongs performing the function it's performing, and leave it alone. Along came a man who was the editor of Scientific American called Alfred Eli Beach, who had been in the subway business too. He tried to develop a subway unbeknownst to Boss Tweed. And Beach said that he understood the need for a large municipal building. He believed that City Hall should remain on its site, so he advocated putting an iron pan under the building, raising it by hydraulic lift, 12 stories or so, putting a new building under it, lowering City Hall to the roof of it, so it could remain in its aboriginal site, it could perform the same function, and we would have a municipal building under it.
He isn't the one who had the subway under City Hall.
Yes.
He is.
Yes. Yeah.
So he did have that little subway at 2 blocks.
2 blocks.
Then how did we get the municipal building?
Well, everyone realized that we really did
need
need
another building.
and there was a whole cry for a development, cloning buildings that looked like the Hall of Records on the north side of Chambers Street. And then people said, well, we need a bigger building.
Is that the Surrogate's Court?
Surrogate's Court.
That's a beautiful building, too.
Yeah, that's one of those great cost overrun buildings.
Yeah.
If you think the Tweedering Courthouse cost a lot.
It was always the thing. So neighborhoods, how did mansions get built? How did people decide where to move?
Well, Fifth Avenue has been the spine of the city for a long time because it's the high ground. And
it is?
Yeah. The highest point, south of Washington Heights, is where Carnegie built his mansion on 91st and 5th.
So that's called Carnegie Hill.
Carnegie Hill, yeah. Because the belief was the air was more salubrious. It wasn't miasmic. Right. And there have been centers of the wealthy. Originally, they were down at the toe of Manhattan Island. By the 1830s and 40s, they were on Lafayette Place, which became Lafayette Street. That's where the Astors live. Right. But then, with the opening of Fifth Avenue and Washington Square at the southern foot of Fifth, people started using Fifth as the main avenue for the wealthy, and it held until the beginning of the 20th century, when it shifted 2 blocks east to Park Avenue. And by about 1905, 1910, Madison Avenue and 64th, 65th was the center, ground zero for the wealthy.
What made some people move to the West Side?
Well, the West Side is the best side, of course.
Of course, we're both West Siders. But who are the people who built mansions on the West Side? We don't have that many big mansions.
Well, they were idiosyncratic people and iconoclasts. Charles Schwab, and not Charles Schwab.
Oh, I remember
not
Schwab.
Schwab
the
has what's his
Schwab
name?
Mansion.
He was the partner of Carnegie.
Right.
Schwab
Oh,
built
he
his
was really
mansion.
eccentric.
Yes, yeah.
I went
And-
there during the Second World War. We were looking for medals to give to the
Oh,
war
yeah.
effort. And this friend of mine that I used to explore with and I decided we were going to go and ring the bell at the Schwab Mansion because we thought they'd have a lot of keys. And they did give us some keys. Somebody
That's
did.
great.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's where Schwab Apartment House now. What
That's
is
right.
it? 74th,
Between
73rd and
74th,
74th.
yeah.
It was this big house on this big grass, right?
That's right. When there was talk of having an official residence for the mayor, LaGuardia was shown Schwab House, and he took one look at it and he said, "Me in that?"
Why? It was too grandiose?
It was too grand.
Oh.
Yeah.
So Schwab was just eccentric, and that's why he went there?
Well, he didn't. He
Wanted a river
wanted
view?
to be sort of away from Carnegie because they weren't on the best of terms. And I think he just said, I can get a nice piece of property here and review. I mean, it's always desirable, of course.
Did religion play a part in who went where?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think that the West Side was.
I was thinking maybe the Protestants were mostly on Fifth, and
well,
I don't know.
I think there was a lot of. I think
On the
that probably
West Side too.
the Protestant elite was on the West Side too.
Yeah.
Murray Guggenheim was on 76th Street, but he moved to 998 Fifth by 1912 or so.
He decided he was going to join the crowd.
Yeah. But no, I don't think there was any religious division between East and West. Stokes, who built the Ansonia, developed a lot of the property. A lot of the property on the Upper West Side was built as speculative houses, row houses. The property along Broadway was not developed early because everyone was holding out. It was billed as the future Champs-Élysées of New York.
It's a boulevard. Right?
Yes, exactly. And people who owned the Broadway frontage kept holding out, thinking, I'm waiting until the time is ripe. Well, by the time the subway arrived, I mean, they had been holding out for 30 years, basically. By the time the subway arrived, they said, we're not going to be building freestanding mansions. We're going to put up apartment houses. So Stokes, for instance, built the Ansonia.
And the apartment houses started at basically 72nd and went up.
Well, 71st had the Doralton.
71st, the Doralton.
yeah.
But it is that little hub at in the 70s because
That's
we
right.
didn't have those apartment houses south. That's why we now have all this development south of 72nd Street.
That's
in the
absolutely
Lincoln
right.
Square
Between
district.
50, I was asked what building stood between 62nd and 63rd on Broadway before it was torn down, and I couldn't remember.
No.
And I had to go look at David Dunlap's book on Broadway to find out.
But then there are those big apartments on 57th Street that go 57 to 56. What's that? It's a V. What is it? 8th Avenue.
Yes.
And now they're pretty. That was pretty early.
No, but that was
wasn't it?
later.
Oh,
No,
it was
that,
later.
that was built in the 20s.
But so, of the mansions and of those buildings, do you have any favorites? Are there some beautiful, or are they very? They tend to be in a.
I suppose that my favorite mansion in the city, well, there are two, both by the same architect, C.P.H. Gilbert, Charles Pierpont Henry Gilbert. And one is now the Polish consulate on 38th and Madison.
That used to be the National Democratic Club.
That's right.
I remember
right.
going there too.
That's right. It had been built by a man who made a fortune out west. He came east to flaunt it, and when his daughter inherited it in the early 1920s, she wanted to sell it to the American Bible Society, but the Murray Hill Covenant precluded that, and that's how the Democrats moved in. It was basically a loss for her. And my other favorite is on the southeast corner of 5th and 79th, which was built about the same time, 1902, 1904. Same style, but grander, Neo-Loire Valley Chateau. It's just glorious.
Now we're almost finished, and we haven't even discussed the Empire State Building.
Oh, well.
It's going to be 75 years old.
That's right, come May 1st next year.
Is there going to be a big celebration?
I hope so. If any building in the city deserves the celebration, it's the Empire State Building. Well, it represents New York, for one thing, and it transcends New York. It represents the United States. I mean, people look at it and they immediately understood. I think it's one of the most recognizable buildings in the city, in the world.
Yeah. It certainly is. It stands there. And
it was very lucky when they developed that site. You know, it had been the site of the original Waldorf Astoria Hotel. And as anybody who knows anything about real estate development knows, it's very difficult to get a full block frontage. Well, with a swipe of one pen, they got from 33rd to 34th on the west side of 5th, and tremendous depth on 34th Street, 600 feet. And it was built in a valley, basically. Tall buildings don't really begin until about 40th Street, about 6 blocks north of the Empire State Building. So the Empire State Building, even if it hadn't been the tallest building in the world when it went up, would have still stood out. And the buildings around it still haven't caught up with it.
And it's got such beautiful touches to it also.
Well,
who built it?
Do you mean who paid for it?
Or who designed it?
Well, Shreve, Lamb and Harmon designed it. They also did 500 Fifth Avenue on 42nd Street. They did many good workmanlike buildings, but nothing like the Empire State Building. I mean, it's just like William Van Allen. You know, he had never done anything before the Chrysler Building that was comparable, nor after.
So are you going to cooperate, or are you going to encourage the people there now to do this big celebration?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Art Deco Society of New York is hoping to celebrate it. We might get something going at the Museum of the City of New York. And the management, I'm sure, is not going to turn its back on it. They'd be foolish to do so.
Do you have a website?
By tomorrow, I hope to have it up and running.
And it's going to be?
If you can spell my name,
yes.
TAURANAC.com. There it is.
All right. And we're going to put that up on the screen so people will be able to look at it and hopefully to get in touch with you. Thank you, John, very much for a very wonderful half hour. We could have many more, I think. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.